Thank you for joining us today for our panel on spiritual wisdom 1 year in, as we are marking 1 year into the lockdown from COVID. I know different timing in different places, but this is really, I think a lot of us are feeling it right now, the 1 year mark. We're going to get started in just a couple of minutes, and I'll introduce our panelists then, but in the meantime, welcome and thanks for being here. Hi everyone, to folks who are just joining, thank you for being here. We are going to get started with our discussion today. I'm going to start by introducing our panelists, who we're very, very grateful to for joining us today and for offering some words of wisdom and some spiritual guidance and some thoughts as we mark 1 year into COVID. Our panelists are Rabbi Emily Cohen is the spiritual leader of West End Synagogue in New York City and a 2018 graduate of the Reconstructionist Rabbinical College. Prior to joining West End last summer, Rabbi Emily Cohen served for 2 years as Lab Shul's Jewish Emergent Network rabbinic resident. Off the pulpit, Rabbi Cohen produces and hosts the podcast Jew 2, Tales of the Mixed Multitude, enjoys writing for Jewish publications such as Alma, and also composes Jewish music. She lives in Brooklyn, but tweets wherever you are at that Rabbi Cohen. So welcome, Rabbi Emily Cohen. I would also like to welcome Rabbi Asher Lopatin, who is the spiritual leader of Kehilat Etz Chaim in Detroit, Michigan. He's also the founder and director of the Detroit Center for Civil Discourse, which works to nurture deep relationships between people with diverse views through dialogue. He was previously the president of Yeshivat Chovevei Torah, a modern Orthodox rabbinical school in New York City. Rabbi Lopatin received rabbinical ordination from Yeshiva University and Yeshiva Brisk in Chicago. I'd also like to welcome Rabbis Mira Rivera, who is Associate Rabbi and Director of Pastoral Care at Romemu in New York City. She received ordination at the Jewish Theological Seminary with an MA in Jewish Studies, and previous to rabbinical studies, she earned a BFA in film at New York University Tisch School of the Arts and danced with the Martha Graham Dance Company. Rabbi Rivera is a rabbi and mentor at Amud, the Jews of Color Torah Academy, and a co-chair of the Rabbinical Council of Jews for Racial and Economic Justice, or JFRIJ. She also co-founded Harlem Chavruta, a brave space for Jews of color, allies, and co-conspirators in partnership with St. Mary's Episcopal Church. Welcome to you. And lastly, Rabbi Menachem Creditor is the Pearl and Ira Myers Scholar in Residence at UJA Federation, New York, founder of Rabbis Against Gun Violence, and an author whose work has appeared in the Times of Israel, the Huffington Post, the Jewish Week, the Daily Forward, and the Wall Street Journal. So thank you all for joining us today. I'm going to start with an opening question, and I'll ask the panelists to share their thoughts. So Purim last year really marked a before and after moment, I think, for many of us. And Purim this year, I have heard more than one person refer to as a yortzeit, and marking the anniversary of this particular bizarre kind of death of life as we once knew it. Can each of you, what has changed since then? What has changed since last Purim to this Purim, which was just this past Friday? And if each of you could address maybe one or two major shifts that have occurred in the last year. So let's start with Rabbi Cohen.
Thank you, Julie. It's an honor to be here with my colleagues and with all of you. And I see a few West End Synagogue members here as well, so it's lovely to see your faces. So a year ago at this time, I was in secular time. It was the day after my last flight. I had just flown home from San Francisco, and the reason I actually changed my trip because I wanted to make sure that I was home in time for a choir rehearsal for a performance we were scheduled to put on in May. And that was our final rehearsal. And of course, we did not put on that concert, and I have not been on a plane since then. But my last Jewish gathering in person was indeed for Purim. And that Friday, one of my colleagues was given a COVID test, and my entire staff was put into lockdown. So that was my March 1 year ago, or I guess late February or whenever Purim was, or early March. And so since then, it's been a really interesting moment for me to stretch into what is possible with Jewish community online. I began my interview process with West End Synagogue in person with my with the panel of people, the hiring committee, but my actual interview weekend was on Zoom. It was the second Shabbat that they had done on Zoom, and I was hired via Zoom. I led everything via Zoom. I think as of now, I've probably met about a dozen of my congregants in person. And so what's changed for me is really being able to dive deeply into what it means to form Jewish community when you're not able to meet in real life, when you only have Zoom screens, when you don't know how tall anybody is, when you can't sing together. That's been a huge thing for me. Just like, how do we make music? How do we make meaning when we aren't able to sing? So for me, going from a synagogue in person to a synagogue online that's different has been a huge change. And there's a lot that's been lost, but I also am hopeful that there will be some learnings from this that I can bring forward even when we can gather in person again.
Rabbi Lopatin, what about you?
Yeah, this is also, I remember APAC was about this time, and yeah, our last, of course, our Purim was right before in Detroit, right before we basically went into lockdown, and all the synagogues decided nothing else that Thursday after Purim. What strikes me is the desire that people have to connect, as Rabbi Cohen mentioned, through whether it's through Zoom. We've been having outdoor services throughout the summer, the spring, the fall, the cold winter. People come together. It's not like everyone comes together, but people really want to connect. And even this strange Purim, I was so worried because Purim is a holiday of being together, and we did lose out so much, and the kids, and no costume parade, no carnival together. But somehow we managed to connect, and somehow we had a Zoom, we had some live readings, but a Zoom reading from someone from England came on the Zoom. So it's really incredible that I hope everyone sees that within them is that desire. And some people unfortunately have not been able to connect, and maybe some elderly or technologically challenged people just can't do it. But there's really this burning desire overall for people to connect, and that's been something that's inspiring. And I hope we, when it's much easier to connect, I hope we connect more, and I hope we connect across distances. I just say this morning they needed a minyan on their Zoom minyan in Grand Rapids, which is like 3 hours away, and so I was actually in a minyan in Detroit, Southfield, but I got on that minyan also. I hope we don't lose this this sense of how beautifully desperate we are to connect.
Beautiful. Perhaps we've gained teleportation in some respects. Rabbi Rivera, what has changed for your community in the last year?
Thank you, Julie. So I belong to two communities. I'm an associate rabbi at Romamu on the Upper West Side in New York City. So we shut down on the 6th of March. I'm looking at my calendar, and so this was before the CDC and the city actually declared that we should shut down. I had worked in a hospital for my chaplain residency, and there, if there is a flu epidemic, we take it seriously. So really, we had this idea: if we shut down, will we look alarmist? So that was a big one, knowing too that Purim was around the corner. But we thought, we have elders, we have a very vulnerable population, and we just thought, look, if we are alarmist, so we'll roll it back, right? Hopefully that would be the scenario, and so that's what we did. And what's the difference now is that we kept our services going, but we also added a morning minyan that has been steady, just steady as it goes. And we are actually back at the center. Twice a month, we run a community kitchen initiative. So masked, everything, we're all masked. Windows are wide open as we are cooking. So we are back in the neighborhood. But prayer services and learning, Chassidut classes by Rabbi David Ingber, everything is online.
That's really beautiful. Thank you, Rabbi Rivera. Rabbi Creditor.
Hi, Julie. Thanks, everybody. It's hard to add to what my colleagues have shared. Purim, is literally a nafochu kind of moment, an upside down moment. Everything's flipped on its head. This last year has felt kind of like Purim. Like we wear masks on Purim that separate us from each other. We're hiding, but we wear masks now so we can be as close as is safely possible. What an upside down way to see things. At UJA, where I serve as rabbi, we don't gather for davening typically, but we did have our first Facebook Live for Purim morning. And we were taking a chance because we never do that. We don't go off script. If you work with a philanthropy, I know Rabbi Lopatan works with with a really important community organization, you're very careful about staying on script. So we took a chance, we set up the chairs, and we had just started talking about the pandemic. We didn't really understand anything. So Eric Goldstein, the CEO of Federation, and I, we elbow bumped and we laughed as we did it. And a good friend was reading Megillah. And I gave this introduction to the community, to the cameras with our staff around us, saying, we're not going to shake hands. We're going to take this very seriously. And then I turned and shook the guy who's reading Megillah, his hand. And I was like, oh, but it was funny. It's not funny, but it was funny then. That's what's changed. Our awareness in this Purim kind of year, that everything has changed. I think the ways that, my teachers just shared, more people are connecting, more of us. I love the idea of just talking about that part of it. We're so desperate to be with each other. So I'll just speak personally. One thing that has changed for me, I've gone to shul in person for the last 3 Shabbatot, which I was very scared to do. There's a nearby shul that has opened things up very carefully. And I used to be a pulpit rabbi, now I'm not. I'm pretty picky about where I go and what I'm looking for and how satisfied I feel by a prayer experience. None of that matters anymore. I just want to be in the presence of other people. And we couldn't sing the way we want to because that's not safe, but I just got to be near. And they opened up the Aron and I saw the Torahs and I started crying because I just miss Torah and I miss, I'm saying I, but I know it's we. So maybe what's changed is the best parts of who we aspire to be as a community are clearer than ever in our eyes.
Wow, well, that's actually a good segue because I was going to ask each of you as rabbis, you're all supporting people in your communities, but of course you're also personally impacted. And I was hoping for whoever feels comfortable sharing to share with us what has changed for you personally. What's changed not only in your life, maybe in your external life or your internal life. And I won't put anyone on the spot, but whoever would like to, please jump in.
I'll jump in on this one. In addition to family life and being with the kids and being with my wife, Rachel, more. One thing that really I understand more now is inequality in our society, and it's so interesting because we're blessed. We live in a beautiful middle-class neighborhood in Huntington Woods. It's outside of Detroit, just outside of Detroit. Beautiful. We go on walks, and we have a backyard. My son, we don't have a huge house, but my son can play basketball in the backyard. And I realize, when we talk about privilege and just blessings, I mean, I'm grateful for that. And it's just it's always this conflict of I have to be grateful for what we've been given. And we have members in our community who can, thank God, go to Florida, go elsewhere, and thank God, you have to be grateful, and they're taking care of their families and their kids. But at the same time, I'm now the director of the JCRC AJC. We work with communities in Detroit. We work with communities that don't have those privilege, don't have the healthcare privilege, don't have the food, the water, all sorts of things, the space. So it's really something that I've been sensitized to, and it's not judging anybody. Everyone, thank God, needs to be appreciative of the blessings in their lives. And at the same time, we have to realize that even who's getting vaccines, there is this element of inequality, and how do we work on that in a positive way? That's something that's really really impressed me, unfortunately, right from the start, from the beginning of this pandemic.
Thank you, Rabbi Lopatin. Anyone else want to jump in? Rabbi Rivera?
What has really changed for me, and I would say a lot of Jews of color, was that suddenly we were being asked to explain, right? So this happened. So March 13 for me was the day. That was the last time we had an in-person funeral, and that Friday night already was our second service online, just the clergy team. But March 13 also, when we buried Barry Grushkin, our community member, a woman named Breonna Taylor was shot in Louisville. So shutdown happened in New York City. Cuomo said, gatherings, cut it down, cut it in half. And the first testing place was opened up. But at the same time, over there in the middle of the country, here was another day where a Black woman was shot, right? Supposedly, the reason was her former partner had been involved in drugs. That was the pretext for coming into her house, inside her house, when actually the suspects were about 10 miles away. So that really changed. So that didn't get a lot of rise because COVID really hit us. But after George Floyd was killed, then began this kind of like national reckoning with the uprisings. So that suddenly now we were being called to account for, to explain. That changed our lives, and our people were like exhausted. We were exhausted for having to say we don't have the capacity, or that we are tending to our people, and exhausted from going from one Zoom to another. And then it sort of died down by the end of the summer. So that was the big change, but that also galvanized us. We already had networks going, and there you go. So I would say doing double duty to my community, Romimu, and doing double duty with pastoral care and actually like coordinating with Jews of color around the country.
Thank you, Rabbi Rivera, for sharing that. Rabbi Cohen or Rabbi Creditor, anything to add?
I can pick up from Rabbi Rivera to say that, so I, unlike my wonderful colleagues, I am not married, I don't have kids, I live alone. And so I did not touch anybody for about 4 months. Literally nobody. Most of my family's in California. I haven't seen my parents or my youngest sister for a year. One of my sisters actually moved to New York in September, and so that's been a wonderful change that I'm able to spend time with her. But what got me out of my apartment was George Floyd's death, his murder. And suddenly, even though I had felt for months as though I couldn't risk it, like I only went on walks when, I mean, I live in Brooklyn and it's crowded, and, you know, so I would go on walks when it was like later in the day when I felt less likely like I was going to run into people. And then the protests started to happen, and I live quite near Barclays Center, which is where like one of the big centers in Brooklyn was, where people were gathering. And I knew that I needed to be out there. I felt compelled. And so even though I knew that there was some amount of risk bodily, I found myself in the streets over and over, and, you know, taking action in that way. Unlike my colleagues of color, I was not interacting as much as a pastoral figure for Jews of color in particular, and so I didn't have the weight that my colleagues of color have and continue to hold. But I was trying to, as much as I could, galvanize my fellow white Jews to take action and to be involved as much as possible. And that was really complicated, especially because I was entering a new synagogue, and it was a synagogue where my congregants had not met me, and one of the first things they were learning about me was my activism. And even though I didn't shy away from naming my involvement in JFridge during the interview process and things of that nature, there's one thing to state I'm involved in social justice, and it's another thing to say, after I finish my day, I'm going to grab a kippah that says rabbi on it and get out into the streets. And, you know, potentially, there were times in June and July where I was saying, it is possible that arrests will happen. And that is a very strange thing to have to say to your board president when you are a brand new rabbi in a job. But it felt like the pandemic of COVID had to take a back seat to the pandemic, the constant threat coming from a place of deep injustice to my family of color. And so that was a big piece for me. The only other thing I want to say about what's changed personally is that I've really leaned into this notion of how can we expand out from our normal ways of doing things. I'm starting a class on Tuesday that people have registered for from 40 states and 18 countries, and you know, it's something that I wouldn't have thought to try in a pre-pandemic society. And so I think that just expanding out what is possible within Jewish community and what will people gravitate to is not a silver lining, because there are no silver linings for a pandemic, but at least an opening of horizons that didn't exist before for me.
Thank you. Rabbi Creditor?
You know, along the lines of what Rabbi Cohen just shared, you know, so I mentioned before that UJA didn't go Facebook Live at all because we were nervous about going off script. But I pitched the idea once we relocated to homes, and probably came from a place of just wanting to be with people, wanting to share that we should start offering a daily, you know, morning Torah moment for whoever would like to show up from the community. So we, you know, it was quite a conversation to be had. We hadn't done anything like that before. It was a good idea, and we thought it was going to be a week or two. So we started, and the first one we did was March 18th of 2020. And I know exactly the date because I've been going live on Facebook every morning since at 9 o'clock. And we're about to do a siyum. Like, we started with Parshat Vayakel. Next week is our siyum. We're going to complete an entire cycle of Torah. And what's happened along that way, first of all, is I have an anchor in my day. I probably do this more for my own soul than for the selfless reasons I could name, you know, but deep down, I need this. And it's also afforded an opportunity for people who, because of the weird platform of Facebook Live, to identify where everybody is and to be friendly with each other. And we all of a sudden have people from Saudi Arabia and Pakistan and Holland and England and all around New York and the United States and Israel, all tuning in. And I had this very interesting experience that I can only share some details of. You'll understand why. Somebody became a regular who I don't know in Saudi Arabia. And I said, oh my God, I'm like, what's happening here? This is, the shul, this platform is there too? Okay. And so I've been greeting them and very excited to see them. And then I get a call from a rabbinic colleague in LA who said, oh, this person really enjoys learning. And I said, I don't know who that is. They said, oh yeah, I forgot to tell you. They use a different name on your broadcast because their curiosity about Judaism would make them stand out in a way that they feel vulnerable about in Saudi Arabia. So this person who's not Jewish in Saudi Arabia, through algorithms, tuned into UJA's thing, reached out to a rabbi in Los Angeles, is connected with all sorts of people, and both that kind of global story and much more hyper local story where people now have a way of reaching out to each other. If that's a change, it's only a change in technique for connection, but that we've adapted, at least many of us have. I know it's not universally accessible, but that many of us have adapted to finding each other and really feeling each other's presence through these screens as portals into each other's lives. That's changed. The realness of that has changed.
That's amazing. I actually want to jump on something that you touched on very briefly, Rabbi Creditor, just now, when you said we thought we would be doing this Facebook Live thing maybe for 3 weeks, right? And I don't think any of us thought by next Passover we would still be doing either small pod or Zoom seders. And I think about what if we had known right at the beginning that this would be so long term, would we have been able to process it, right? And I think of Elizabeth Kubler-Ross's stages of grief. And I'm wondering, do you see stages, have you seen stages over the last year of acceptance, of denial, of whatever, maybe these different stages, and maybe they're not linear, either your own or ones that you've observed? I'm curious if folks could speak to that.
I'll jump into bookend because it connects in some ways. I'll think about your first question first, which was, what if we had known? I think, I'll just speak for me. I think I would have gone mad. Stages of grief are maybe even more important to consider as ways of surviving it. And so maybe coming to know what we've come to know at the pace that we've come to know it has been important. But I also think that the end of what you asked is important too. I don't think there's anything linear about this, and I doubt that we've even begun to process our grief. Tomorrow night, UJA is convening, and anyone who'd like to join is welcome to register online. We're convening our whole community with a unified message from our rabbis, from first responders, with a little bit of music. I don't, I'm definitely angry, and I don't know how to express that. And I am really sad, and there are moments where it removes my ability to speak. I've made this joke during some of my teachings that I schedule my panic attacks for 2:30, but really they happen all the time. And I have kids, and I want to reassure them, and I don't know that I can. And I have work to do, and I feel incapacitated many moments. And I feel very fulfilled by it because we're forging our way into this strange new world. So to reconcile myself, it's another one of those stages. I think that we've adapted very quickly, but emotionally we haven't even had the chance to process it. I think especially caregivers, social workers, and to tend to those who've tended to our dead. The Chevra Kadishas that have been working to take care of us, and the funeral directors that have been working to take care of us, and the nurses who are reading headlines about how it's just hurting them so much. Everybody, clergy obviously included. I think we have a lot of resuscitating our souls to do.
I'll pick up on that. I don't think we've been able to be in grief at all. Which I think Rabbi Creditor you were sharing, but there's just so many pieces of this that are mind-bogglingly horrific. I mean, I had a conversation with somebody last week who'd lost a family member, and I had to tell them that I could not do the funeral because they wanted one indoors, and I am not vaccinated and don't feel safe. It's like when you have to decide between pikuach nefesh, between like the preservation of life that is happening and the honoring of the dead. How do you do that? How do you figure out how to meet the needs of congregants when there's Zoom glitches and they're telling you about the most horrible things and you can't fully meet them in that moment because you miss half of what they say and the logistics get in the way? How do you continue with business as usual when you see the numbers every morning of, like 2,000 dead, 3,000 dead, a 9/11 every couple of days for a while, every day for a while? I am really worried not only about this, the toll of COVID as we are experiencing it, but also how in the world, how in the universe we're going to be able to process this when we do have some form of herd immunity. Because I'm just worried that we have so much pent up emotion that we haven't been able to express, that there's going to come a time where we just lose it. And, I've been saying for months that I wish we could just pause. Like, I feel like we need a Shabbat for our entire community, not in the sense of having Shabbat, which is wonderful and we get it every week, but a sense of actual rest for the workers, for the people in mourning, for the caretakers. We are all holding so much, and I don't think we've even touched the surface of the toll that it's taken on our collective psyche.
So I'm just inspired by my colleagues here and comforted and given strength through their words. The other side of the coin really is that there are certain people that are, I think, living in denial and really feeling, well, I don't do Zoom, or I don't do outdoors, or I don't do this, or I don't do that, and my wife Rachel and I talk about this, like, this is here. This is a battle against a pandemic. We know that there are people say, I don't do masks. I don't do this. I don't do that. This is on the one hand, we have to all this emotional baggage that, as Rabbi Cohen said, and we haven't even dealt with. On the other hand, we can't afford to slow down. I mean, that's sort of, whether it's with an organization, Jewish Community Relations Council type organization, or whether it's a synagogue or whatever, or a school, we gotta do more. We gotta do more and more. So it's almost really harder because we cannot take a Shabbat yet. And I think we have to be, whether we're whatever, everyone is a leader in this, really. It's certainly clergy have to be the ones that really encourage people and say, well, try it this way. If you can't do it that way, whether it's, B'nai Mitzvah, whether it is, whatever it is, that it's as difficult as things are, for our children, for everyone, our families, and for our society. We have to find a way of pivoting, of being clever, of fighting this pandemic and not letting it defeat us. So it's really doubly hard. We have this pain and we can't slow down. And, I think there's, so it's kind of denial on both sides. It's not denial, it's recognizing that this is here, we have to deal with it, but it's kind of pushing away some of the emotions and saying, just can't afford to let it slow us down.
Rabbi Rivera, do you have anything to add?
it's a marathon, right? When it began, I remember thinking to myself, echoing Rabbi Menachem Creditor here, and I'm a fan of his family. His family is like steady as it goes, kol mishpacha, you know, to the service of the Jewish community. And I just really thought, okay, a marathon. I have personally to take my physical fitness and my mental fitness. Like, I really have to hone it down. Maybe it's the training of having been a dancer in my past life, right? That's just like, okay, steady as it goes. What do you need? I need morning minyan. And then everything else goes on top of that. And what does my family need? And where does grief fall into this? I don't really know. I have broken down. I think the time I really broke down was when I was trying to get the community kitchen initiative going, getting all the permissions, getting all of the okays from everybody. And I spent 3 days crying. Anyone I spoke to on the phone, I would just break down and cry because it was just so hard. People would say to me, why now, Rabbi Mira? Can't this wait after Sukkot? Right? It was all of those things. And 3 days, I was just crying every conversation. So I think that was my grieving. And then on my good days, I just say, steady as it goes, this is a marathon.
Well, I just want to thank all of you for A, being so open and honest, and B, for doing what you do. And I know so many people benefit from all of your work. And I thought maybe you could offer to those of us who are having a hard time right now, which I don't know, is maybe all of us, some advice or words of wisdom or something to keep in mind as we move through this at the 1 year marker. Rabbi Lopatin, can we start with you?
Sure. I think Tselem Elohim, it comes back to humanity and the human being in the image of God and how precious human beings are, and that is bittersweet. You know, precious it is to lose them, to lose each other, but how precious we are to each other, and how, you know, some of these B'nai Mitzvah, I mean, almost all of them, they're like Zoom, and you spotlight, and you have, or if it's a service that's on Zoom, you could spotlight, and 2 seconds of a person saying Shabbat Shalom or doing that, I mean, that's so precious. So let's cherish that. Let's realize that is precious. Let's realize that 2 seconds with a person is infinite, and let's seek that out. And that's what I would really push for. Seek it out. Seek out those connections. Seek out those connections through time, friends that you've had. And, you know, we have so many vehicles to do that now for, you know, these, you know, I was talking to someone, you know, whether she didn't remember what she communicated with me on WhatsApp or messaged me on Facebook or texted me, or, you know, let's seek that out and let's gain comfort through that and take that in and internalize that. We for all this horrors of this pandemic, it should not destroy us as human beings and the ability of human beings to connect with each other. And let's just cherish that and seek that out.
Thank you, Rabbi Lopatin. Rabbi Creditor?
It's the right question, and I don't know that there's a good enough answer. I hear Rabbi Rivera's Torah on this really deeply. You know, be as steady as we can, and whatever brings you steadiness, just make that your ritual. I'll tell you, I have this practice inside of me. It's not a siddur, it's not a prayer book. It's, you know, and Well, I'll tell you where it came from too, because among the comments I'm seeing from some of the people who are with us today is, thank you for not speaking in platitudes. Like we're very human humans. We're being who we are, and I believe that's who we are as rabbis in the world too. A really wonderful therapist who really helped me many times in my life. I was sitting with them, and it was an early stage of working with them, and I said, just tell me it's going to be okay. And this person was a minister, and they spoke in languages that really worked for me, and also spoke like a sailor, so that worked for me too. So I can't exactly say what they said to me in that setting, but they said, Menachem, it's going to be a mess, but you're going to be okay. So actually, I have a practice that happens more often these days than I ever would have imagined I'd need to, which is literally putting my hand on my heart and saying, you're okay. And just not moving my hand for a minute. Now, modani means that, right? There's enough in the world. There's more than enough in the world. And as I notice even my breath, my hand, I notice that I'm noticing. I well up with gratitude, but being scared and worried and frightened and sad makes it hard to access those feelings. But when I put my hand on my heart, there's it's not just my hand on my heart. It's not just my hand. And because of what I believe about God, it's not just my heart. I'm accessing something really important there, and it sustains me. And I think that even when it's going to be possible to daven more safely or gather more safely, this that I'm doing right now is going to be something that I try to keep doing because it's helping.
Oh, thank you. And I see people in the chat are really, these are helpful and useful things that people are hearing right now that you're sharing. Rabbi Rivera, Rabbi Cohen, any either spiritual practices or advice, things from our liturgy, pieces from our canon, what might speak to people right now?
For my little community, Ashrei. We've been going through Ashrei, like everyone like going through one by one, piece by piece. If it worked for our rabbis before and our people, it's gotta work. And there's this one prayer, really like one of those kind of, I call it like an intake of breath just before Kaddish de Rabbanan. That, I don't know in which Sidurim it would appear, but in my Sidur Slim Shalom, my maroon one, it goes, Yeh ratzon milpanecha, Shem Eloheinu, Jetiten chalkeinu betoratecha, may we be given like this portion, right? This like just like this sliver in your Torah, having like masticated, some Mishnah beforehand. Benihiyem talmidav shel Aharon HaKohen, may we be as the students of Aharon. And then here is when it goes like deeply what that is. Ohev shalom, we love peace. Berodef shalom, we pursue peace. Ohevet habriyot, and we love the many. Korban la Torah, and we draw each other closer and closer to Torah. So it's one of those transitions. It's not a big prayer, not a big one, but I so appreciate those little transitions that bring us along, like an intake of breath, and also of being awed. Dibarti.
Shamati. I was trained in the Reconstructionist movement, and we speak of Judaism as existing in two civilizations, or Jews as existing in two civilizations, the Jewish one, and in our case, the American one. And so for me, there's like these two calendars, the Jewish calendar in which we're, in the middle of the month of Adar, and then the secular calendar where it's March. And people have been making jokes all year, kind of gallows humor jokes about March being like, oh, it's March 270th today or whatever it is. But here we are back in March. And so I found that I needed a ritual for myself to mark the beginning of this month of March. And I thought about the pillars of cloud and the pillars of fire in which God appears to the Israelites. So I'll just like explain it in brief if anybody else wants to do it. I'm going to be doing it myself later today. You'll need a piece of paper, something to write with, a lighter, and a sink. Actually, you'll need 2 pieces of paper. But so the first thing is to think of 3 strong memories from the before times. You know, the sorts of things that you were doing at the end of February, beginning of March last year when things were feeling a little bit normal, and to write them down. You know, so it might be a trip that you took or a meeting that you had or a date or a, you know, anything that felt normal. And then you're going to fold up your paper and take it over to your sink and set it on fire and let that memory, those 3 memories, be processed in that way. When the fire goes out, or when it gets close to your fingers, whichever happens first, please be safe, drop it in the sink and turn on the faucet and let the water kind of dissolve the ashes. Then you're going to take a new piece of paper and write March 1st, 2021 on it. And you're going to write down 3 prayers or 3 hopes, one for yourself, one for your community, one for the world. And every day in March, say those 3 prayers out loud. And in that way, bring yourself from March 2020 to March 2021 and just try to connect the pieces a little bit more. So it's not a Jewish ritual per se, except that it does include these boundaries of time and of marking time and just this imagery of sending something up and receiving what you need to receive.
Wow, that's fantastic. Thank you, Rabbi Cohen. Since we're talking about time, I thought perhaps we could talk about the future. None of us know what's going to happen, of course, but we're seeing the numbers start to decline. There's a sense of hope, at least that I feel in me and the people that I'm talking with and sort of watching the news. But at the same time, perhaps a hesitancy because we don't know. We don't want to be disappointed again. So what are your thoughts about this? Can we feel a little hopeful at this point? Do we need to stay realistic? How are you all feeling in terms of looking ahead? Rabbi Cohen, can we start with you?
Sure. There's always hope. I do feel that way. I think sometimes we have to work to craft it for ourselves. I think at times it's not obvious, but certainly within my community of West End, we have a lot of elders. And so our people are getting vaccinated, lots of them. And I'm not, and some of the other people certainly are not, but the notion, I've been having people as they are vaccinated, if they choose to, bench Gomel, which is a prayer that we use after having come through a harrowing, potentially life-threatening physical experience. And when I ask people to unmute and bench Gomel, there are multiple voices each week. And so I am hopeful to think that within a few months, even though I think it's correct that it's not going to be a suddenly everything opens up and it's back to normal. I'm hopeful in the sense that I think that there is progress toward something resembling normalcy. And at the same time, I don't want to go back to normal. I think we're going to continue in some sort of like virtual in-person hybridity forever. I think there's always going to be this like expanded notion of what the Jewish community looks like and who partakes and from where and in these different modalities. And I am hopeful that seeing the terrible, terrible inequalities in our society that were put up on a pedestal due to the pandemic, that won't just go away. So yes, I want us to go back to a place where we can hug one another, where you don't have to have a laugh track for the Purim spiel because everybody is there in person. But I'm also really hopeful that some of the pieces that have come to light during this last horrific year will lead us to create a better world, not just for those of us who are lucky enough to be in a good situation, but for everyone.
Thank you. Rabbi Rivera?
My hope is that we learn from our ancestors. We are alive right now because of their resilience. Plain and simple. Whether we take the vaccine, whatever it is that has kept us alive up to this moment, it's pretty stark. But if I wake up in the morning, I go, I'm good here. Yeah, I'm good. So finding some, whatever chutzpah you need to, to draw out of you, like employ all of those. And what gives me hope is even in leadership, we don't have to do this alone, right? Partnership with our people, with our clergy teams, with our leadership teams. This is really, for me, this is the key at this moment. Like one person who says, I know how to do this all, I'm not too sure about that, but partnership.
My wife always jokes that I thought Katrina wouldn't be a problem, the storm would be okay. So I am terrible at predicting things. I'm very always optimistic and doesn't always come out. And so I really try to focus on some other things that we have that are really going well. I mean, I'm working a nonpartisan organization, and synagogues are nonpartisan, but I have a lot of confidence in our government now, and we're starting to talk about things that are so important outside of COVID, that are so important about minimum wage and healthcare and voting and immigration, and these are issues that have been building up for so long. And after George Floyd, we are beginning to deal with racial justice in our country. So whatever your politics are, there is a lot of positive, really great things that are going on that are huge issues that we're starting to deal with. So sometimes when I can take my mind off of COVID, and there are good things happening there with vaccines and everything, but are we going to get these vaccines to the poor nations? Are we going to distribute them? There are good things happening in this world, and so I try to look at those things and get hope through that, and hope there'll be money coming into people that desperately need it. So I try to look at really the positive things that are going on, but I am just scared of how long this will last, and I don't even want to say this, but the next pandemic, and look, maybe we'll be much faster with vaccines and everything, but I'm scared. So I try to look for the beautiful moments in individual people, the people waving to each other in the street that don't even know each other, those kind of things, and the big issues that we're starting to deal with in our society, and get some hope from that.
I want to answer hopefully. We are, as Rabbi Lopatin said about himself, we are irrationally hopeful. And that's a bizarre part and a wonderful part of being a part of the Jewish community. Israel's national anthem says it well. Od lo avda tikvatenu. We still haven't given up hope. And Nebuch, like, really, that's what we say about ourselves? We have so many reasons to have given up hope already, but guess what? We didn't. So I think that there is something important about letting that in, that the world has actually never gotten it right. And we, as a community, have never gotten it right, even when we've had the chance. And we have the chance now. So I think that what I'm hopeful for is larger than this moment, as if anything could be. I'm hopeful that our descendants will look back and say that we were good ancestors, that we'll make better decisions now, and we'll remember longer than it seems like people do about what we've been through. The Talmud says that Jews are notorious for forgetting older problems because we always have newer ones. I think it's really, really important to not fall into that trap. It's really seductive, and there's a healthy kind of forgetting that we do when we go through pain. I know, but what gives me hope is that we're going to defy the odds and achieve more justice for more people and not take each other for granted and be good neighbors and make sure that the members of our society that don't believe in science begin to respect science a little bit more. You know, I mean, if we're going to make it through this, and we will, may we have fewer opportunities to say, may we make it through this. That's what I'm hopeful for, that we'll hold each other to account when we act in harmful ways, big and small, on the Jewish level, on the individual level, on the societal level, on the governmental level. I mean, we have to do better than just survive. So I'm hopeful that we'll do better than just survive.
May it be so. Thank you. Thank you so much to all the panelists. I think that you did address my final question. I'm going to ask it anyway, but you a little bit, you spoke to this in the last question. My final question was, is there anything the virus has taught us? What can we learn from it in terms of our society, our world, ourselves, that we are going to take into the future? So if you have additional thoughts either on that or anything that you would like to add or close with, please, whoever would like to share. Rabbi Rivera?
You know, when we say Oseh Shalom B'Mrumav, right? In some places, we're still kind of like mumble it through Velkol Shvei Tevel, right? And include somehow sotto voce other people. But if there's anything that this pandemic has shown us, it is equal opportunity for all. And that we are truly one with each other. We truly are. And if we still think that we should only care for ourselves, I think we are moving out of that, because we see that we cannot just care for ourselves, for the Jewish community, but we have to make and start building relations with the rest of society. And there are some people whom we agree with, and some people we will not agree with, but in this we are together.
I just say Rabbi Creditor and Rabbi Rivera touched on this a little bit, actually, that, you know, there's frustration with people that don't accept science, that are not, why can't you mask? I don't understand. And in the Jewish community. And so I saw one of the comments, like, there is rise in anti-Semitism. Oh, there are a lot of things in this world that are really, really bad, but at least maybe we're a little bit more aware. And we're struggling, and whether we'll solve them or not, I don't know. But like Rabbi Creditor said, maybe we're not pushing things away and forgetting about things as much. Maybe we are dealing with these issues, and maybe even, you know, the different communities that are for some strange reason not keeping safe. Maybe in the frustration, that will bring out something that will, you know, thesis, antithesis, you know, synthesis, that'll bring out something good. So at least we're more aware of the issues and the problems that we have. And, you know, I'm hopeful that'll get us to a better place eventually, as frustrating as it is now.
So God animated the first human by putting breath into that human. And this year, I think we've learned in a tragic, horrific, very real way that my breath is your breath, and my life is your life, and your life is mine. And the billionaires have gotten richer. And one thing I've learned from this, going back to what Rabbi Rivera was saying a moment ago, is that we can't wait for others to come in and fix it. Our communities have to be able to hold one another, to offer to one another. I got involved in my local Buy Nothing group recently on Facebook. I almost never use Facebook anymore except for professional reasons, but you know, I've been trying to buy less, to participate in commercialism a little bit less, and I've, you know, been able to trade jigsaw puzzles and offer people random things that the Mishloach Manot that my synagogue sent included rice crackers. I don't like them. I gave them to a neighbor, and it's just, there's so many ways that we can hold one another that we aren't currently holding one another. We thought of ourselves as being in some ways these independent entities, and we're just not. And so I want to carry that learning forward, that my breath is your breath, my life is your life, and if we hold one another, we will be better together.
I'll only add an amen to my colleagues. It's so beautiful to have these opportunities to hear each other's hearts and to know that we really are, as Rabbi Rivera said, we're in this together. My language for it won't be so different, except to say, and I'm quoting Paul Farmer, who's a really well-known immunologist, a world-changing human being. He said, some people do the right thing because they feel called to do the right thing, to be righteous. But there's another reason for doing the right thing, which he calls pragmatic solidarity. Right? If I don't take care of you, I'm not taking care of me. The idea, as Rabbi Cohen said, that my breath isn't your breath. We've learned that. And, you know, there's something really practical about being good. So I think that's, if I could bless us to learn that one thing, it's what we're all saying. It's really practical to be good. That's the way we go forward. That's the way we survive. And that's the way we do better than survive.